All right, I think we are live. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. We have a very exciting webinar today as part of our CPO series. So we'll give everyone just about a minute to get settled in, and we'll begin shortly here. But in the meantime, please do say hello, let us know your name and where you're joining from. As for me, I'm Christina, and I'm joining from Austin, Texas. So hello and howdy, everybody.
Hey everybody, I'm John Field, and I am joining from Atlanta, Georgia. Hope everybody is, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, seeing spring start to stick its head out and, get a little bit warmer, and that everybody in the Southern Hemisphere is enjoying the ends of their fall.
So John is currently Vice President of Product Management at Talogy, which is a strategic talent management, assessment, and development company that combines psychology and technology for talent solutions. So John owns the product strategy and the roadmap aligned with the overall corporate strategy, ensuring that the platforms are continually improving for Talogy's clients and the participants who are experiencing assessments. So prior to Talogy, John has held engineering and product management leadership positions at IBM, National Instruments, Terminus, and a variety of other B2B SaaS startups. And I'll now hand this over to John to kick off the discussion on how to break the build trap and shift your PM organization from requirements production to customer impact. So John, it's so great to have you here, and I will pass the mic over to you now.
Well, thank you very much. Can you see me and hear me? All right. So what I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about today is some of the things that I have learned over a career of about 20 years being in product development, whether on the engineering side or whether on the product management side, and especially talking a little bit about how do you take product organizations that start from sort of early stage organizations, maybe there's a few product managers, a little bit of process in there, and then how do you build it up to where you've got effective product management organizations that are efficiently helping guide the organization to build what the customers need. And so in order to get started, let's just talk a little bit about me. I am a Purdue-trained computer engineer, and I got my start really working on robotics and smart sensors at a company called National Instruments. And after being there a few years and doing some of that work, I got the opportunity to lead the team that was building the Windows and Mac software and some of the drivers for Lego Mindstorms NXT. And it was a really neat project. I got the opportunity to go over to Lego's headquarters and help shape a neat product that was really geared towards helping students get excited about programming and math and science. But as part of that, I was an engineering manager for the team, but we didn't have product managers. So I was spending just as much time telling my team what to build as how to build it. And so when I looked for my next opportunity to join startups, I had two resumes. I had a product manager resume and an engineering manager resume. And so back in 2008, I made the transition over to product management, but I've always been sort of more on the technical side of product management, more of a systems thinker. And so you'll get to see some of the outcomes of that today. So as I transitioned in, got an opportunity with Silverpop to grow from about 15 to about 500 people. We got acquired by IBM, which was about 450,000 at the time. And so got a chance to see product management run at a variety of different sort of size organizations, had the opportunity to kind of spin it up from scratch at a couple of startups, and then got a chance to join Talogy here in 2020 as we were preparing for a large sort of new brand launch, a large major platform that we were building. And so what we needed to do was sort of grow the product team, is make it a little bit more sophisticated. And so as I kind of present to you today, it's really sort of learnings that I've gotten over all of these parts of my career. And so what I've seen in a number of different companies is sort of this two-stage kind of process, where when you've got the early stage product management team, what are some of the things that I commonly see? And then sort of in the more established product management teams, what do I see? So for the early startup sort of teams, they tend to be more focused on the what and the how, as opposed to the why. And so a lot of times this is built because there's not a lot of folks that are there, and the startup may be still trying to sort of ensure it finds product market fit. They are trying to just churn out features as fast as possible. And so with that, the product team is responding to requests that come in many different ways from many different teams. And so especially for younger startups, this may be from the startup CEO themselves, right? Because the startup CEO, either they tend to be strong in product or they tend to be strong in sales. And in either case, they're going to be all over those early sort of product folks to sort of say, here's what I need you to build. How quickly can you get it built with the engineering teams, right? And it's really there from an efficiency standpoint to get the features out the door more quickly. At this stage of product organization, you probably also have a number of different flavors for prioritizing and doing backlog management. If there's multiple product managers that are already in the organization at this point, there's a good chance that each one of them manages their backlog their own way. Each Scrum team or Agile team may operate differently. And so the way the Agile teams work then affects the way the backlog is prioritized. And so it's one where there's a high level of autonomy and effectiveness, but as you sort of grow the product organization, that can be hard to manage. And similarly, there's a lot of different flavors of communication back to the stakeholders. So depending on who the product manager is and what their particular strengths are, they're going to be communicating back to the business stakeholders in one of a number of different ways. And so the other thing, and the thing that we're going to talk the most about in this session, is that the reason that they tend to be in the build trap is that immediately after they ship the current feature, then they're going to focus on the next feature. And so it's one where it's just this churn of feature, feature, feature. And there's usually not a lot of opportunity to sort of pick your head up and say, wait a second, are we really doing the right thing? Should we be, focused on something else? It's like the list is a mile long and they're just trying to knock down it as quickly as possible. As organizations are able to become a little bit more established, they're kind of characterized by a few different things. So number one is that I think that they shift from that what they are building to where the product managers understand and articulate the anticipated return to the business from the investment of building a feature. Sometimes this is the estimated ROI or the EROI, but they're able to understand the business problems well enough where that's where they are focusing. With that, they also tend to have a sort of a centralized system for managing platform requests, where, sort of in the early stage, those requests can come in email, Teams, Slack, just hallway conversations. It tends to be kind of all over the place. As you grow, you get to the point where you need to have that centralized system for managing platform requests. And there needs to be some kind of standardized collaborative prioritization framework that's in place. Now, some people will use Rice models or other things in terms of having a data-driven prioritization. Some people have sort of regular planning and prioritizing cadences where they're going to talk about it with their executive team. But regardless of the approach that is used, there is a level of standardization, and there's also the rest of the business understands what to expect. From the product management organization in sort of these businesses. They also have a consistent communication approach for items being requested and what the progress is. So, when you sort of have that early stage product management team, sometimes just because somebody requests a feature doesn't mean we always remember to go back to them and say, hey, we actually got around to being able to build it. So what does the feature do? How does it work? Is it out in the market? Those things can vary, when you're sort of that early stage product management team, but established product management teams usually have a much more consistent approach to that. And then finally, the established product management teams, I feel like, tend to do a better job of making the time to evaluate the returns and learnings from previous investments. They tend to have a little bit more staff, and so it's a little bit easier to be able to do that analysis, and then being able to then go and share it with the business as well. So For me, when I go into an organization, I've kind of built this mental model. And as I mentioned, I'm an engineer, so I tend to be a systems thinker. And so this isn't meant to say that one size fits all. In Melissa Perry's book about breaking the build trap, she has a different way that she talks a little bit about, kind of figuring out how to break out of it. But for me, when I am evaluating an organization, this is sort of the model that I tend to start with. And so kind of walking through here, here on the left, you have, requests that come in from your consulting team, your client success team, your sales team, and so for each one of those, I'm going to be asking the question of like, how healthy is that pipeline? Like if consulting is seeing something going on where they think it should be different, how do they raise that concern? How do they raise those requests that say that we need to improve something in the business? I'm going to ask the same questions of CX. I'm going to ask the same questions of sales. And so this is for, like for instance, if I was coming into a new organization, I'm going to start by meeting with the heads of those departments, key influencers in those departments, really trying to understand what does the product organization look like from the perspective of each one of those departments. And then that kind of helps me assess like, okay, how is the request process coming along? Then from those requests, you've got this prioritization framework that then sits in the middle. So this is one where I know there's a lot of strong feelings, all over the place in terms of, is this a rice model? How much of it's data driven? How much of it's collaboration driven? And so definitely there's not one size fits all as those requests filter in. But in order to do effective prioritization, I feel like you've got to also have two additional points that come in. One of them is strategic guidance from the executive team. And for some companies, the executive team naturally does this very well. They'll tell you, okay, we're looking to raise revenue in this industry, in this market. Here's how we think we're going to be able to do it. And so as a product leaders, it's easy for us to then be able to lean into that and say, great. So based on that being our direction, here's how we're going to support this from a product standpoint. Here's the roadmaps that will deliver this. But sometimes it could just be a growth number overall that says we're looking to grow the company, 5%, 15%, 30%. And so then what you have to do as a product leader, if that's what's going on, it's actually a fantastic opportunity to sit down with your executive team and go, okay, so we got to grow 30%. Where do you think that's going to come from? How much of it's cross-sell? How much of it's new business? How much of it's upsell? Like based on all of those things, like what are the features that we believe that we can deliver that are going to help drive those business outcomes? And just as important as the executive guidance is then the guidance from the product managers that are getting sort of the hand-to-hand combat data that you need in order to make good prioritization decisions. So as I'm sort of evaluating an organization from the first, are the product managers looking at win-loss data and NPS feedback, similar to the request side of things, as different parts of the business have feedback on the product, how much are we able to look at that and understand it? And then also, are we doing, adequate product usage? It's not just, is somebody on the right screen, or what does our monthly hit count look like? But it's also looking at things from a flow standpoint of being able to say, are we actually delivering the value? So it's not just is somebody setting up the feature and letting it run, but can we tell that they have actually gotten value from that feature is one of the key things around product usage. And then of course, there has to be great estimates great relationships with engineering, because you've got to have those great relationships with your engineering counterparts so that when you come to them with like, hey, here's some of the requests, here's kind of the problems that I'm thinking about solving, how are we going to solve it? How big do you think this is? If you don't have trust with engineering, then you're probably going to get an outrageous estimate, and it's probably not going to be a great collaboration. So really looking to make sure that the product managers are also feeding into that prioritization framework. So all of that happens, and you kind of bring all of that together, and you get either one or more product roadmaps. Here at Talogy, we're a portfolio-driven company. We have a few dozen platforms that we use to meet the needs of tens to hundreds of thousands of customers and participants in our assessments, but I've also been at startups where there's one product roadmap. And so being able to bring this together and then communicate it, as your organization sees fit is one of the things that's really important. And then probably my most controversial part of the slide is probably my next one, which is around the requirements. And this is where, for me, I believe really strongly that product managers are the strongest when they are the ones that understand the business problems in depth, and that they focus on the business problems and understanding what those are and prioritizing them and understanding solving which problems will move the needle and how do we measure what the success criteria is for solving those business problems, and then partnering with our UX team members, with our engineering leaders to then say, how do we solve that problem? And so when it comes to then doing that, like for product managers, we all have ideas of like, okay, we've researched the problem enough, we know our product, here's how we think we should solve it. But if what we do is we lead with the solution, then we end up in a state where it's easier for both our UX team as well as our engineering team to just check out and say, yeah, I'll just build whatever the product person tells me to build. I don't think it's going to be all that great, but it's got to be their idea anyway. That when we can really sort of present them with the problems, allow them the solution, and then we just evaluate that against our success criteria, we really instantly get them bought in. They're definitely more engaged, but they're probably also going to come up with ideas that we didn't think about. And they're probably going to build a solution that's more maintainable because it's theirs. So I look for opportunities to not lead the solutioning process, but focus on the business problems. So then you've got development, then you've got your acceptance testing. And then I sort of go down sort of the go-to-market launch criteria and say, am I seeing organizations where, product is partnering with marketing and sales enablement? Is there a clear demo environment? How about training our customer success teams and our provisioning teams? Do they know how the products, the features are working? And then what's the health of our customer facing documentation? What does that look like? And how is product kind of helping shape that? And then the bottom part is the most important to me, right? Is that after we are shipping those features, are we then bringing this back to where we can understand how our success KPIs are driving? Are we seeing the platform usage that we hope to see? If we're trying to do things like we're going to build this feature because we're losing, X number of deals per quarter to it, what is the pipeline impact that we expect? And then are we seeing it? And can we articulate to the business the impact of us building that? Or are we still seeing it showing up in loss criteria? So that means maybe we didn't quite hit the mark and we need to make sure to iterate on the feature. So again, this is not a one size fits all, but in order for this to kind of really hit home, there's a few things you have to work on with the product managers, because the product managers are the key to pulling all of this off. This system, this way of evaluating, it only gets you so far. You really have to have the product managers be able to help you move from that early stage to that more established organization. And the first one that is key for this transformation is they have to be the business owners and not the business analysts. So with this can be a little bit touchy, especially in organizations where the financial data is viewed as something that isn't or shouldn't be shared with the product management organization. Definitely, this is one where I would be leaning in as a product leader. If I don't know how I'm profitable, where do I make money, which features are causing me to lose money because they're generating support complaints, all of those kinds of things. That's where I like the product managers to kind of shift away from the requirements and shift into thinking about it a little bit more as they're a business owner. That said, I'm not a huge fan of the CEO of the product mindset, so definitely don't misconstrue me there. Product managers have to get to where they become a trusted advisor and not the requirements writer or backlog builder. And this is one where, again, it's one of my key things, is that the requirements writing is the output of our expertise and not the definition of our value. I'm going to say that one again because I really want it to stick. That requirements writing is the output of our expertise and not the definition of our value. And so by being that trusted advisor, they're able to sort of understand the business from all these different perspectives and use that to kind of build roadmaps that maximize the ROI. And once they have that understanding, they then help everybody understand the business better. So that when consulting is running into a challenge with the customer, like the product manager is one of the people that's on their mind to be like, I need to reach out and see if this product manager has an idea of how I can overcome this challenge. And sales is doing the same thing. And then engineering, as they're making trade-offs, right? They're doing the same thing where they're like, I need the product person, not because we're going to have to divide up, this story into multiple stories and span sprints and all that stuff, but to really say, hey, we've got this trade-off that we need to make, and we need to understand more perspective from the business so that we understand how to make that trade-off. And finally, the product managers have to become that confident facilitator. And so, especially for somebody that has their background being a business analyst, this can be one of the toughest things to help people be able to develop. So, if the PM calls the meeting, then I want them to be the ones that are leading and guiding the discussion, even if they are outranked, right? And it's very common for product managers to be in meetings with directors and VPs in other departments. And so when they're in that situation, they can't let themselves get overwhelmed. They have to be able to have, tough feedback come their way, whether it's on their roadmaps or whether it's on some of the outcomes that they are driving towards. They have to be able to kind of handle it in the moment. And then be able to maintain their credibility. So if they're under fire for something, being able to say, okay, so that's good information. Who else might have some perspective on this? And not get their feathers ruffled. It's very much one where being able to do that is one thing that really allows the product managers to be an asset to the organization, to be able to further their career, where they aren't in a situation where they feel like, oh, I didn't have the answer, and that means I failed in that meeting. They've got to be able to be that confident facilitator. And so then the question is, okay, so if you're trying to drive those kinds of changes, the question is, what makes a great product manager in an organization that is making this transition and has an established product management mindset? And so we always get the question, right? Are you guys gatekeepers? Are you decision makers? I actually don't view it that way. I would tell you that the best product managers that help me drive these transformations, they aren't the best decision makers, but they're great listeners, right? And the reason that the listening is so important is that makes it easy to figure out what the path forward is. And so with that, right, great PMs have to have a strong network that helps them see the problems around the business, right? They have to have spent the time to understand the problems deeply, and they're good at helping others see the problems, how they're affecting the business, even from different perspectives, right? So they're comfortable working with others to collaboratively prioritize the work. And they're really good, again, at not stating the solution, but they're good at facilitating a solution-oriented conversation where they get engineering and UX and QA and stakeholders from all over the business, where we've done the work to sort of say, here's the problems that we have to be able to solve, in order to impact the future of the business. How should we best solve them? And then making sure that they keep the affected parties in the loop as things change. So obviously, right, you do great work up front, you feed it into the dev team, it goes through that dev process, and then what comes out the other end isn't what the business stakeholders expect. You're going to be in a tough spot. You're going to be in a spot where you've damaged your credibility a little bit. And so the thing that I would tell you that all of this results in, right, and this goes back to the decision maker question that I sort of put up there, is that I would tell you that the secret of a lot of successful product managers, they're not the decision maker and they're not the smartest person in the room, but they have listened to enough people, they have facilitated enough conversations that they see the inevitable conclusion that the business is going to make. They see who are the key stakeholders, who's really going to be making this decision, how do different people see it, who's going to get their way, all of those kinds of things. And then it's really easy for those product managers to say, well, here's the inevitable conclusion. Here's the inevitable prioritization that's going to drive the biggest impact for the business. And so because they tend to be one of the first to say it, they look like the decision maker, or they look like they have a crystal ball. But really, I would tell you that their secret power is that they are great listeners. So let me talk a little bit about areas where Dragon Boat is helping me and the team here at Talogy build this as sort of today and kind of where we're going in the future. So we are already using Dragon Boat for the consulting requests, the different requests that are coming in. We use their request module as a way of feeding things in. We've decided at Talogy, at least at first, to sort of start with the more collaborative prioritization framework, where it's based on the listening and the partnerships, both from myself at the VP and executive level, making sure that everybody understands how we're making decisions, why we're investing in the certain areas that we are investing in. Our directors of product management have a strong network at their level to make sure that they're reaching out to the sales directors and the consulting directors and understanding what do things look like at their level. And then for our product managers, they're focused on both the director level as well as the individual contributors from around the business. And so by kind of having this sort of three-tiered sort of prioritization approach where we're getting input from all of those levels, it really helps that as we are presenting our roadmaps, that we're able to do it in a way where we're rarely surprised by feedback from the organization that said, well, you guys don't get it, and this roadmap isn't going to work, and let me explain why. But then the other thing that this does is that for us, Dragon Boat is our central source of truth when it comes to our planning process. And so with having that central source of truth, I'm going to show you a little bit about what that looks like in a minute. We have an opportunity to do one of the things that is it's central to sort of me and how I like to operate. It's that do your best work and hold it with open hands. And so what that looks like is we work really hard to make sure that we're understanding the business problems, that we're prioritizing things, that we're understanding the levels of effort for engineering. And so that we then put that into a proposal for a roadmap that we're then going to then take and shop around with all of those levels. And by doing all of that homework and then holding it with open hands, it gives us an opportunity to say, so based on our analysis, here's what we think are the biggest problems that we need to be solving, but what do you think? Did we get this right? Is this moving in the right direction? Are we driving towards the right outcomes? Or are we building something where you're like, hey, that looks good, but people are never going to use that feature, and let me explain why. And so all of this sort of product management and product manager sort of transition from a mindset perspective, all of the work that we're doing here to kind of build this virtuous cycle, it really falls down for us, or for what I have seen, if you don't then have that relationship where you can say, well, here's my research, what do you think? And so having an easy way for people to digest that is one of the things that has been key for us. And then we're also using it from a go-to-market launch standpoint to make sure that as we're partnering with marketing and sales enablement and customer success and others, that they have a central source of truth that they can look to as well to see, not only sort of what is coming up from a long-term perspective, but then what are we working on right now that we are going to ship. And then we are starting to also kind of get Dragon Boat to where we are going to leverage that bottom sort of reviewing the success KPIs and things like that, so that ideally it's one where not having to create an extra deck and talk through those things, that we're going to be able to see that in Dragon Boat as well. And so I thought that what we could do is just give you a little bit of a peek into how to get started with this. So just sort of seeing the fundamentals of how we currently work in Dragon Boat. So what you can see here is that this would be the basic structure for one of the platforms that's in the portfolio here at Talogy, where we would sort of have, we divide it up by quarters, and we would sort of say, here's some of the epics that we hope to get done. The epics need to be definitely verbalized in a way that the rest of the business understands the value that they are going to drive, not just the feature name that it is. So we use just sort of the basic priorities. And then we have delivery status, and then we have sort of what's the health of the items. And delivery status is the one that I thought it might be good for us to kind of touch on. And this is especially where my engineering roots are going to show, because I want to make sure that the business can understand, what are we thinking? Not just for the short term, what are we thinking for the long term? We tend to run about a 9 to 12 month horizon on our roadmap at Talogy, but I've definitely been at companies where it's a startup and we're only running a 2 to 4 month horizon on our product roadmap as we were getting started. And so it sort of all starts with the projected area. And the projected is, here's the stuff we hope we're going to be able to do. Typically, this tends to be about 6 to 9 months out. We haven't really started diving into the details. We can't articulate exactly the ins and outs of the business problems. We just know that there's something big that we need to solve over there. And then once you kind of get into the early in the current quarter, maybe into the next quarter, you move into targeted items. And for targeted items, we've done the work to identify, here's the major things that we need to solve. And then we've got engineering able to sit there and go, oh, yeah, okay, so if you're sort of saying we need to solve these problems at a high level, we think here's the work that needs to be done to do it. And so then what we try to do is we try to group those to where we then go and work with the teams to say, okay, guys, you've got, a quarter. Does this feel like about a quarter's worth of work to you in terms of what you're going to be able to deliver? And they go, yeah, we think it is. Okay, great. Then that's your target for the quarter. And then when it comes down to committed, that's the highest level of detail. So for this, there's detailed requirements. This for us is likely down in Jira. We've got the completed technical design. We've done the task level scoping to really confirm the feasibility of shipping this feature within this quarter, and we are willing to commit to it. And so this is one where at the beginning of a quarter, you don't have a lot of features in committed. As you kind of get about halfway through the quarter, most of the features have flipped into the committed state. And there's sort of one exception to that, which is if sales comes to me and says, hey, I can land a $4 million contract in Q4 of this year if you commit to this feature. There is a process for having that conversation. And so we can commit to it, but once we do, that becomes an anchor point. We're going to add more buffer. We're not going to have as many items in that quarter. We're going to do the things that basically says, look, if you're going to make us commit to something that we don't know all of the details on, then we are going to sort of give ourselves some grace, and there's going to be other areas of flexibility. So with that, hope that everybody enjoyed sort of the little window into what we have. And so I am going to hand it off to Christina to talk a little bit more about what Dragon Boat can offer.
All right, so many amazing insights and learnings here, John. So thank you so much for sharing. It's been a really big pleasure, and we are coming up on time here soon, but we do want to take a few questions. I see some lots of great questions coming in through the Q&A. But before we move to that, I would like to conclude by sharing through partnering with thousands of product leaders like John, we've learned that these leaders do need the right tooling for their teams to achieve their goals. So you can check out how DragonBoat can help your product teams by booking a free consultative demo at dragonboat.io/CPO. And then some more resources for you. If you're looking for a career opportunity, Talogy is hiring. So again, Talogy brings science and technology together for strategic talent talent management and development and a variety of different assessments from personality to cognitive to emotional intelligence and more. So they do cover all industries, job types, and organization levels in more than 20 countries. So since they have more hires planned for later this year as well, you can keep an eye on Talogy.com/careers if John's talk today sounds like it could be a fit for you. So please do feel free to chat with John, connect with him on LinkedIn, and check out their careers page if you're interested. And you can also check out more CPO resources with all our upcoming and on-demand webinars at dragonboat.io/webinars. Check out our free responsive product portfolio management certification and download our free guide to accelerate business outcomes as well. All right, and now time for the fun part. We've got some audience Q&A. By the way, if you still have a question for John, feel free to drop that in and we'll try our best to get to all of them. So John, if you're ready, I'm going to throw some questions your way.
That sounds great.
All right, so I see a few questions and some of them kind of follow the same theme, but how can product leaders ensure their PM organization remains focused on customer impact over the long term? Some strategies for sustaining that focus. And then similarly, someone else asked, how do you think product leaders can approach embedding these practices and tools if senior leadership doesn't maybe quite understand product best practice, or they aren't yet willing to invest in growing or developing the team?
All right, so two great questions. So when I think about long term, um, how do you make sure to have these conversations? And I think that the way that you make sure to have these conversations is by having these conversations, is what I would tell you. So as product leaders, we have the ability to go and put time on others' calendars and ask the questions. And so whether that is sitting down with the product managers and saying, hey, I'm looking at your roadmap. I see a lot of great features. I'm really excited about what you're building. You're clearly innovating. Let's go through each one of them and tell me, what is the business impact going to be of driving this one? And how are we going to measure it? And then you're talking to them and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Is the sales director that's over that industry, are they bought into this as well? Or how, what have you? Like, you get the opportunity to continue to shift product managers' focus in this direction by the questions that you ask as a product leader, and that you get the opportunity to do that as well with your executive team, right? So, for instance, if my VP of sales, in APAC texts me and says, oh man, we've got to have this feature, we're losing the deal, what have you, I'm going to go back and be like, okay, great. So help me understand, what is the context here? What are the problems that they're having? Why can't our current platform solve them? Are you seeing this in other deals and other situations? And then I'm going to go and I'm going to turn to our other sales leaders across the world and say, hey, are we seeing this in Hong Kong or Dubai or US or EMEA, any of the other regions? And so the questions I ask and the way that I partner kind of helps with both of those things. And I would tell you, it's not just for the leader of the product organization, but it's also for the product managers to be able to do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So another question we have, you talked about business analysts and product managers. So someone asked, what are the overlaps of BAs and PMs?
That's a great question. So that is probably a webinar all in its own. I have run organizations that have product managers and business analysts, organizations that have product managers and the product owners that are sort of the more day-to-day agile leader on the Scrum team. And then right now, we're running an organization that only has product managers. And so for me, it's one where I find that by having one person that is responsible for understanding the market from the product perspective, from doing the research, being the same one that's plugging in with the engineering team and making sure that they get what they need on a daily basis, that having that be one person is the most effective path to success. Any times where I've tried to then split up those roles, I tend to find that I'm seeing too much telephone game, where some of the essence of what we're trying to do and why we do it gets lost in the details.
All right. And then another question. We have a lot of internal debates on tool first or process or practice change first. So what is your take on that, John?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I'm going to do the politician answer, and I'm going to answer it totally different. I'm going to tell you it's culture first. I'm going to tell you that you've got to get the culture right, and as you get the culture right, the process will then sort of follow based on what the right culture is, and then you get the systems to support the process that you want to implement.
Love it. All right. And then how can PM teams ensure that they are selecting the right tool for achieving their business goals? What steps can they take to mitigate the risk of investing in a tool that may not deliver the expected results?
That's another great question. So this is one where we spent a lot of time doing it. When we were sort of evaluating it, so when I came into Talogy, it was largely spreadsheets and kind of some homegrown things that we had. And so we went through a really extensive vendor search as we're sort of figuring out, what is going to be our roadmap platform. And the thing that I would tell you is make sure you're picking the right partner for you. And if you pick the right partner, if their technology has some things you like and some things you don't like, with the right partner, you're going to grow together. And so that is one of the things that is super important. So maybe it's a little cheesy to end with, but it's one where we've been extremely happy with the partnership that we have with Dragon Boat, with some of our other vendors. And so I would definitely encourage you to make sure that you pick the right partners.
Amazing, John. And we have one more minute just in time for one last question here. So how can product leaders measure the success of their efforts while thinking about shifting the PM organization's focus? So what type of metrics should they be tracking and thinking about?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So what I would tell you is that, when you're doing a change like this, that you need to set up, I tend to like OKRs for this kind of a project, is to make sure that if I'm doing an organization transformation to move it from that early stage to more the established organization, making sure you're putting SMART goals in place so that you know what your goals are quarter by quarter. How are you going to measure your success, whether that's people following a new practice, whether that's the number of items that are flowing into the new way, or the number of exceptions that are no longer happening. I think it's going to be, sort of organization dependent, but I would strongly recommend OKRs for the change management process.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for those awesome, amazing questions. And again, thank you so much, John, for joining us today. I know I personally learned a great deal from you. So that is all the time that we have for today. Such an incredible discussion. So thank you, John, and thank you, everyone, for joining our CPO series today. We'll see you and catch you at the next one. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.